What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be talking about the Tennessee Titans 2024 deep dive. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. You guys know to use YouTube. This video will pertain a draft class breakdown, a roster breakdown, as well as a records prediction. And it's not going to be the longest deep dive series in the world. There's a lot of guys who I think have even more in-depth knowledge, but it's a great way for me to be able to learn the rosters myself because you guys know I'm a draft guru. It's what I do, and I'd rather be fully informed. If I do say something that is wrong, let me know. I'm pretty damn confident with what I know. However, you guys are fans of one team. I'm a fan of 32. Always going to be a little bit of a slip up here. And then, based on the rosters, these are going to be the projected depth charts based off of our lads as of right now. So there's always some things that are subject to change, always worth discussing. But let's get right into this. Let's talk about the draft class. Started out with pick number 7, getting J.C. Latham. I was a little bit underwhelmed at the time, but the more I watched all these edge rushers for the 2025 class, the more I realized J.C. Latham is much better than I gave him credit for. Granted, I still had him like up there with the best of the best, right? Like he still was a guaranteed starter for me. He was an easy top 5 tackle. I think he might have ended up being my tackle too. So, I mean, he still ended up being someone who I had a lot of love for, but I did have some concerns in terms of his processing, and then you're kicking him over to left tackle. I don't know if that's going to fully work out, but I do think the best part about your team right now is the fact that JC has the flexibility to work at left or right tackle. That's the beautiful thing. Is like you don't have a secured option at either side. So let's say JC struggles a little bit at left and says, I feel more comfortable at right. Put him to right. Like you're not gonna. I mean, Nicholas Petit-Ferrer, like ooh, scary. No. So I really do love the fact like it's grown on me so much. And then you got T'Vondre Sweat, which with all of his party allegations, his weight fluctuations, I just thought that was a little bit too early. I thought that was more of a reach for need than actual pure value, but I really do like T'Vondre Sweat. It's just the fact that he is, apparently a character-wise a liar and somebody who doesn't know how to control his substance use. I'm not going to go into that. I know some other people have really, really hammered him online. I'm not going to be doing that. Although if I were sitting in a GM seat and I found out that someone told me that they were done doing stuff and then they were doing it, probably wouldn't spend a top 40 pick on them. But the talent is certainly worth it. So I'm hoping to God that, the criticism is wrong and that he is going to be a really, really good asset to be right there next to Jeffrey Simmons. And then at 106, you got Cedric Gray. Solid value for a good linebacker. You have a really poor linebacking core. We'll discuss that, but I was a fan of that pick. It was a little bit early because I had some other linebackers that were higher, but I think that if you took out who else was on the board, like the opportunity cost, I thought the value was pretty damn solid. Then you got Jarvis Brownlee Jr. I had Jarvis Brownlee, I think, as like my number 40 player in the draft. You got him at 146. This guy is, I think there's a clip of him getting a pick 6 during some rookie camp. So, he's already been able to at least show that he has some form of talent. He's a really, really good player. I was watching Quincy Riley and ended up falling in love with Jarvis Brownlee all over again. This guy is special. He is awesome. Don't overthink it. This guy's going to be one of your starting corners in the next couple of years. Jaquan Jackson almost took me out with one of his sideline catches at the Senior Bowl, but I honestly thought that was a really solid pickup. James Williams, good value there in the 7th round as well for someone who I thought when he was a true freshman could have been a legitimate top 5 player in his class, and just didn't end up living up to that. And again, with the linebacking core as iffy as it is, I thought that was good value. And then Jalen Harrell at 252. I think I'd probably take back the fact that I'd say that's my least favorite pick. I'd probably put it as T'Vondre Sweat. But it was just overall like a really solid draft. Like it wasn't something that blew my socks off. It's not like franchise changing, but I definitely didn't think you shot yourself in the foot. And I'm a really tough cookie. C is adequate. So B is a really solid grade. And luckily, there was a lot of really good drafts this past year, and you guys had one of them. So let's talk about the offense. We'll go from skill position to line, then defense line to skill position. Starting out with the quarterback, Will Levis. I really have a lot of hope for Will Levis. He's someone who I really, really like. I don't think that he's going to be as amazing as maybe the fans of Will Levis, like maybe myself, want him to be, but I also think he's far better than what the critics end up saying. analytically, he's actually done a really, really good job, especially if you factor in how awful that offensive line was. I would not be surprised if Will Levis was a top 15 quarterback at the end of the year. Wouldn't shock me one bit. I do think the running back core could use a little bit of work. The fact that you guys brought in Tony Pollard and put him above Tyjae Spears. Again, this is based on our lad's depth chart today. And like, I'm not a fan of that. I really wanted Tyjae Spears, knee intact or not, to be the starter. I really do think he's a superior talent to Tony Pollard. But, it is what it is. I thought that maybe having a little bit more of a Samaje Perine type would work well with Callahan coming into the system, but it is what it is. I do like the fact that you still have Tyjae Spears. It's not a bad position to have, but at the same time, I'm just not overwhelmed by it. But the receiving core is awesome. I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, who cares if he's older? Who cares if he's not the best wide receiver in the NFL? He's still a very competitive weapon. Tyler Boyd got brought in, obviously very familiar with the head coach from his time in Cincinnati. And then Calvin Ridley. People say that was overpriced. Whoop-de-doo, man. I mean, it's $23 million a year for a legitimate contributor, and he doesn't have to be the number one this year. That means he actually might be able to shine. So I'm a really big fan of that. That receiving trio is probably one of the best in the NFL, especially on paper. And then you got Chigakonkwo there at tight end. You also have Josh Wiley as well, backing him up. And speaking of someone who's now having to do some special teams work, is Treylon Burks, which has been a little bit of a kick in the nuts to a lot of us who really wanted Treylon Burks to succeed. But offensive line-wise, we already talked about J.C. Latham. Peter Skronsky was a huge fan of the fact that, you took him with the vision of him being a guard. That arm length was a bit of a concern if he had to hold up a tackle. Obviously, if injuries occur, he can, but I think he's going to be a really, really solid guard. Lloyd Cushenberry, I think that was a solid pickup in this offseason. You can't really complain about that one. Sadiq Charles, at the moment, I actually had some other guys from about a month ago when I made these that were the projected right guard and right tackle starters. But at the moment, Sadiq Charles is going to be the guy who's, hoisted or projected to be the starter. Not a big fan of that. Same thing with Nicholas Petit-Frere. Probably the worst unit would be the right side of the offensive line. Didn't adjust that, but when you were looking at a floor for the offense, if Will Levis doesn't take a big step up, again, I still think he has a really, really solid floor. If the offensive line struggles, I think this offense is probably a B- at worst, because you still have a really, really good receiving group and a coach that knows how to get the ball out fast. I think at best it's probably going to be a B+. I don't see a lot of ceiling to DeAndre Hopkins because of his age. Tyler Boyd is just really reliable, but again, the ceiling is not nearly as high. But I do think that Callahan ends up really heavily balancing the floor. So B is just it's a good grade that I could feel very comfortable with. And I really do like your offense. I do. The defense, I think it's different in the way that the offense overall is relatively consistent in terms of talent pretty much across the board, except for that right side of the offensive line. The defense, I do think, ebbs and flows. I still think overall, really solid, right? C is going to be adequate. But starting out with that D-line, T'Vondre Sweat, we already discussed him. Sebastian Joseph Day, not going to be someone who I'm going to rip apart at all. He's a solid contributor. Jeffrey Simmons is, legitimately a superstar. I love him to death. That was somebody who I was wanting my Steelers to get back in that draft. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know if that was the draft, but I don't know if we moved up for Devin Bush. If we did, I will actually cry. But your edge rushers, Harold Landry, really solid edge rusher, just needs to, he's had some health issues in the past. But Arden Key was someone who came over from Jacksonville, and he had a really good year there in Jacksonville. He hasn't been overwhelming for the Titans so far. A lot of people say you guys need another edge rusher, but I've seen a lot of videos of his work in the offseason. I love players that continue to work, and his hand technique appears to be improved. We'll see if that's empirical on game day. It's his linebacking core that just really pisses me off. Like, genuinely pisses me off. Jack Gibbons. I think I'm pretty sure it's Jack Gibbons. Like, I'm sorry. Who? And then Kenneth Murray was a complete bust. So, you're really dealing with that. Again, you got Cedric Gray there, and hopefully that will end up being the starter, but I'm looking at some of the other depth players here. You got Otis Reese IV as your second right inside linebacker projected at the moment. It's not good. And the depth is not good either at the moment. But looking at the safeties, you got Hooker. I'm a fan of Amani. I'm a sucker for Iowa defensive back. So he's a solid player. Elijah Molden. He was one of my guys who I just absolutely adored there from Washington. I don't know how much I love him at free safety, but I understand because Roger McCreary, that early second round pick, he's done a really good job, but I was more so afraid of him as a boundary corner because he has, I think, sub 30-inch arms. It was like 29-inch arms. It's like he's in the right spot, and that's why he's able to succeed. L'Jarius Sneed's awesome. I mean, we'll see if he's able to maintain that quality of play, which I think he will. And then Cheeto Awuzie is not a slouch either. So you have a solid corner core here. I'm not going to shame it, but there are massive gaping holes, especially at that linebacker spot, which luckily you have a good defensive line to at least reduce the need for your linebackers to step up and improve and perform, but it's not good. To me, it's a really, really, really big red flag for your roster is having those two guys be your starting linebackers. At 37 or 38 or 39, whichever pick Tavondre Sweat was, I genuinely thought you looked at the linebackers on the board, you get Edger and Cooper there, I'd probably give that draft an A. Like, that's the difference between Tavondre Sweat and, and a Cooper right there. You also had Peyton Wilson if you wanted to trade back, even though he doesn't have an ACL. Like, who gives a damn? I mean, he's going to be a one contract guy, but I mean, so far as I'm looking at this roster, I don't really know if I'd want to keep these guys for one contract. I'd rather get somebody who I'd want to keep for a contract and that's it, versus somebody who, not really the biggest fan. But overall, you guys have a really, really solid roster. We're just at the point in the NFL where teams have just continued to improve and improve and improve, and they're very cognizant of where they're weak. And they're doing a very good job to patch it because there's a lot of talent out there. So that's why you guys are going to be sitting around 27th in my overall rankings, even though I am unbelievably biased to want to give you guys a higher rating. But let's talk about that records prediction. Let's get right into it, and let's see what we end up with. All right, jumping right in, we already have 2 games in the books. Yes, this is cumulative. That way I don't have the ability to just BS other records. I think you'd appreciate that. Now, you'll see a lot of these teams here that don't have their full records laid out, like the Patriots, for example, or a couple teams at the bottom of the AFC West. You will see that it's relatively high, win-to-loss ratio, right? And I'll tell you why. It's because these teams are ranked higher. So, yes, it does kind of make sense why these teams that I have ranked higher will be beating teams that I have ranked lower. Pretty logical. But looking at what the Titans are going to be facing, week 1 in Chicago, Caleb Williams, that's a game I don't know if the Bears can lose. Like, the amount of energy that they're going to have. And the Bears have a really solid offensive line. They have an elite receiving crew. Like, it's a receiving crew that can match how good your secondary is. I really do like the run game that they have. Looking at their defense, like, the only thing I don't see is an edge 2. And you only really need one edge rusher at one time to win, and that's Montez Sweat. Like, I know JC is going to be having a fun time, but it's going to be his first game as a left tackle starting in the NFL. I will be giving this game to the Chicago Bears. Like, that's the Caleb game. I usually lean towards teams that have a little bit more chemistry. And to be fair, you have a whole new system that's going to be coming in. So you can't really be the main person that I would trust, or the main team I would trust to have that chemistry week 1. But with Caleb, I do think that this is a game where all the eyes are going to be on him. And it's going to be a game that you need to prove yourself. Week number 2, I will be giving this to Tennessee over the Jets. I like the Jets more significantly. However, I do think that Tennessee's climate is just awful. You can actually pretty much pick apart the Titans a little bit, or pick apart the Jets a little bit more, I think, because Aaron Rodgers is going to be coming back off of that Achilles. And yeah, he's been throwing for a little while, but it's a little bit different when he's in game contact, or in contact football, essentially, versus, pretty much playing versus air. I do think this is a prime opportunity to sneak out a good win because you have the home field advantage. Week number 3, we have the Giants. Every time I see the G, man, I swear to God, the Packers going to the Titans. You guys are hosting them at home. I do think this is a winnable game, but Green Bay is a squad that I do really trust to ground and pound a little bit better, and they have a really solid offensive line. I mean, you're kicking in a top-tier tackle at the moment projected than Zach Tom to center, right? Like you just have a really, really good offensive line. And, I think it can cancel out your defensive line for the most part. And they have a good running game. And I don't trust your linebackers to win that battle. You can say the same thing about the Jets. I mean, I'll be 100% honest, but the Jets also have some older dudes. The Packers are young and ready to gun. Like, I really do have a lot of faith in the Packers. Week number 4, I always give the games, especially like if the Dolphins are at home, I'll always give them the games. If it is like, I'd probably lean them anyways. I'd really like, that's where home field advantage really comes in. Miami is just freaking brutal. But if they're a very good squad, they are superior. Like, it's not like I'm going to just say because they're at home, they're going to win. No, they are a superior squad at the moment. They have a really deep edge rushing crew. Again, with Nicholas Petit-Frere as your right tackle, it's not going to be super duper easy. I do also think that their secondary is not too shabby either, especially when they brought Kendall Fuller in. I'm a huge fan of that, by the way. Or was it Kyle Fuller? I'm tripping. Which Fuller is it? They brought in Fuller, and that was a great, great pickup. But then you get a bye week here. You face the Colts at home, fully rested. The Colts are going to continue to be kicked in the balls. I wonder if I'm going to be switching a game for them because deep down, I don't think they should be going 0-4 versus the teams that are worse than them. But we will see. But fully rested, I think this game is close enough to be able to have that close of an exchange. At week number 7, you go to the Bills. I don't think that we're going to complain about this one too much. They are kind of the Super Bowl. They're a Super Bowl competitor, and they are certainly going to have a lot of momentum based on this year. They're going to be trying to do their best, trying to replace Stephon Diggs. It's going to be tough. Week number 8, you're going to Detroit. That's not going to be an easy game either. They're a very, very, very solid roster. Their corner core is like pretty much everything they invested in. And so I have a lot of faith that Detroit, especially since they've even boosted their defensive interior, like DJ Reader on that defensive interior, that was a huge gaping hole that they had. They plugged it perfectly. And they're a superstar roster as well. At week number 10, we got the Titans going to Los Angeles. I think I would give this game to the Titans if it were at home. Instead, you are away. I will be giving this one to LA. The Vikings go to Tennessee in week number 11. I think that Tennessee will have that home field advantage. I don't think that they are too far off in terms of talent-wise because the Vikings need to figure out their starting quarterback. I know it will be J.J. McCarthy, but will J.J. McCarthy be that successful early on to be able to win games? I'm going to trust Will Levis. Week 12 in division, you're at Houston. Houston's a superstar roster right now. They can genuinely make a push. And, again, that's even if you want to tamper with your expectations for CJ Stroud. So I'll be giving that one to the Texans. Week 13, you're facing Gene Daniels and the Commanders. I do think you have a good enough defense to put so much pressure that, you could certainly cause enough issues. My only concern is that if Jaden Daniels gets out of the pocket and runs, like he could genuinely be a game changer in this one. This is a game that highly could be flipped because I don't trust your linebackers to contain. And I don't really think your edge rushers should be used to contain versus a crappy offensive line. But the Commanders are a team that I have them as the worst team in the NFL. And I love Jaden Daniels. I think he's going to be their superstar quarterback. It's just, man, that offensive line bugs me. It bugs me. And it's not even like they don't even have tomato cans. They just have ass. I mean, they have really, really good player in Sam Cosmi. But, overall, just absolute cheeks. But at week number 14, you face your in-division rival in Jacksonville. You are playing them at home. I think that the gap has closed, so to speak, because I don't trust Jacksonville's secondary. They've done a good job trying to retool their receiving room, but I'm going to be going and giving you guys that win. You face the Bengals at home in week 15, and this is always a matchup that is so fun to watch. So instinctively, I want to go Bengals all day, but you guys have kryptonite for them. But that is Vrabel who had kryptonite for him. But this is also even more on the line because Callahan is going up against his former coach. And usually those coaches that go away have like a lucky win, even if they don't deserve it. I'm going to give that to you guys. Week number 16, I will be splitting with Indianapolis. I do think they're a very talented roster. I have them as a better roster than you. But, I do think that the talent is close enough to be able to have that split. Same thing with Jacksonville. I don't really think that you guys are far superior to be able to beat them. And yeah, you'll see a trend here. It's luckily the games are close enough. This is actually a fun schedule because there's going to be high variability here to where you can be splitting a lot of these games. But in week 18, I think that there's going to be too much on the line. Let's look at our record right now. Where are we at? 7-9. Since we're going to be a little bit outside of the playoff bubble, I think that there's going to be a little bit more on the line for Houston here. So I'm going to be giving Houston that win. I don't think they'd be resting their starters, but I mean, overall, they're a fantastic roster. I mean, I don't think that would be a shame to be swept by a team that actually does have a ton of momentum towards a Super Bowl push. But I mean, hey, being 7-10 is a really solid place to be. And we're looking at right now, and based on all the teams that I've graded, I mean, look at our in-division record. So technically, we're worse than the Giants at the moment, but the Giants had some easy gimmies in there, and they're facing the worst team right here. But regardless, you guys are doing a fantastic job. Like, I really do have a lot of faith in this roster. Again, if we're talking about a floor and a ceiling, like, I think you could potentially win week 1. You could technically have that home field advantage in week 3. I mean, you could beat the Chargers. You could split with the Texans because I don't think the Texans are like unbeatable. And I think that's fine. So you could be upwards of 11 wins. That's the ceiling. The floor, however, is you could be beaten by the Jets, right? I don't think you're going to get swept by the Colts. I don't think that's very logical. The Patriots, no, I don't think that's one. But the Vikings, if JJ McCarthy really can hit the ground running, they're a really solid roster overall. I do think that the Commanders could be a sneaky spot. The Bengals, obviously. I don't think the Jaguars are going to sweep you. So I think it's plus and minus 4. I think the absolute floor would be a 3-win, but I'm really sticking pretty heavily to that 7-win. I'm really happy with where that is. I would say my likely floor and ceiling is 6 to 10 wins, and that's a really good spot to be in, especially since you're still retooling that offensive line. You still have really big holes on your roster. I do think that this is a team that really has a very bright future. So stay tuned. Keep your hope up. I really do love Tennessee. They're a great squad, and you have a really good fan base as well. Let me know if you will have anything to talk about. You can be a dick, just don't be a dick about it. Love y'all. See you on the far side.